just want to start. And we talked, I was kind of like excited. I was like, wait, Kellie's like perfect to talk about like all these things. One, because you have so much style. You always look amazing. Your hair, I've known you for a long time. Your hair's always looked so good. You have great hair. You're Italian, so you have great Italian hair. But knowing what you do, working for Google, and being a mother of 2 boys, I know that you're very busy. So thank you so much for spending the time with me. What I've thought about, I thought about putting together a podcast. It was more about trying to connect to people in a different audience the way that I do with my clients. And so for me, being a stylist, for 30 plus years, I've been very successful with creating these personal relationships with everybody, whether it's my clients, my team, vendors, everybody. It's like, I think that's the key to my success. And so what I want to try to do is relay that somehow online. And so starting here, I think is a good idea. And so things that I want to talk about are career, style, confidence, and faith. And so those things could mean a number of different things for each individual. But for you, Kellie, can you just tell the audience like what you do?
For my career, I lead a large sales team that focuses on advertising at Google and YouTube. I've been at Google 18 years now. I never thought I would be at a single company for that long. Before I worked at Google, I worked for 7 years and I was at 3 different companies in 5 different roles. So I was, going in the direction of trying many, many different things in my career. But once I got to Google, I really just felt like I came home, and it's been an amazing place to grow and develop and to try a lot of things. But very simply, I do advertising at Google, and I support global retailers. And so I love fashion, I love style, and I love trends. And so this is a really great way to marry the things that are happening in technology with the things that are happening in fashion.
Sounds like the perfect job for you. It's amazing. Did you visualize a position like this as a young girl, or do you think it just kind of came to you and then how do you think you ended up where you are?
Yeah. I didn't, because Google didn't even exist when I was a young girl. So, and that's something I actually think about a lot when I talk to young people. I think there's a lot of pressure to know exactly what you're going to do and where you want to be. But look at the evidence of the last 10 years, a lot of companies, a lot of opportunities, a lot of job types, they didn't even exist 10 years ago. So don't limit yourself. And for me, I think I've always thought about what I want to do next versus what I want to do last. And neither approach is right or wrong, but I think each approach then produces a different outcome. So I work with plenty of people and I coach plenty of people who know what they want to do last. They say, okay, I want to be the chief marketing officer of this type of company, or I want to be a chief financial officer and take a company public. And those are amazing goals. And then when you have that goal, you can work backwards from there. You could say, here are the experiences and the evidence that I have to have in order to prove that I'm ready for that last thing. Then the other side, and the side that I'm much more inclined to do for myself, is okay, I'm here right now. Where do I want to be next? And what are the conditions that have to be true for me to be in that next place? And a couple things over the years that I've just really solidified is I have to work for a place in a company where the values are aligned with my values. And so as long as that continues to be true, I'm okay, I'm here, I'm at Google. That aligns with my values. I love it. Then I want to be around people who are smarter than me. I want to there's a sports analogy in there that if you practice or play with people who are better than you, then you're going to get better. I feel that way about work and about intellect. Can I just be around people who are better than me, and then I keep getting better? And Google has provided that. And then the last thing is, as I've worked longer and longer, I've started to learn about things that I don't like and I don't want to do, and how with each role can I get rid of and shed a few of those things. So sometimes it's about the type of work. I don't like to be in front of spreadsheets for very long periods of time. And so I don't want to go towards jobs where that's a big part of the role. And then at other times it could be about the people, managers that have a certain style, or certain industries. I worked with the alcohol industry for a long time, and it was incredibly competitive. And there were just elements about the industry that I was I don't know if this is for me long term. And then the other piece that I've really learned over time is that if there's a component of the job that is centered on human behavior and why people are making the choices they're making, then I really thrive and I love it and I can't get enough of it. So even going back to the example about when I worked with beer companies, like why people choose the beer they choose when they have all the options, that was like a fascinating dilemma that I just couldn't get enough of learning about. I went to a different role where I worked with YouTube and figuring out why people watched what they watched and how trends started to emerge. That was super interesting. And now with retail, the human behavior is shifting so dramatically in how people shop and how they discover things and how they decide like what they like and what brands that they're going to be loyal to and how fast that's changing. That goes back to that like human behavior component. So those things have always helped me kind of decide what do I want to do next.
Thank you for sharing that. When I think about someone who's always thinking about what's next, what comes to my mind is someone who has a lot of confidence in themselves, knowing that they can get to the next step in the next job, in the next platform, or, they can apply for a position or just decide, hey, this is what I want to do next. I mean, that takes a lot of confidence, right, in yourself. Can you talk a little bit about self-confidence, confidence that you have in yourself, confidence that maybe you've had as a young woman, as how you are today as a mother and working for Google? Could you rate your confidence level now versus say 20 years ago?
Oh my gosh. Well, it's definitely improved, but I think there's always room for improvement. So when I was young, I think as many young women, I had a lot of work to do on my confidence, but it was a different time and it was a different environment. And I have an enormous amount of compassion and empathy for young women today, where there's even more inputs where you could question, am I good enough? Am I doing enough? Do I look like I should look? We didn't have that many always on inputs. And I still felt those things, like that question of like, is this enough? I think as I've gotten older, I have more proof points to prove that like, no, this is enough, or no, I've been through this, or no, I've proven this already, that builds confidence. So proof points are one part of it. And then also just like what I let in, like the messages I let in, the people I surround myself with, I try to like really, really think about my inputs. I have like a mantra that's like interesting input equals interesting output. I want to produce interesting output, even whether it's socially, like with my friends and family, like be a fun person to be around and have interesting things to talk about, or whether it's at work, like have a perspective, have a point of view. And I'm like, I won't be able to put out that interesting output if I'm not putting good things in and input. And I think really monitoring that and paying attention to that has also benefited my confidence because I don't have a lot of inputs that then are just feeding potentially negative thoughts.
I love that. So you said briefly that you worked on your confidence. Can you speak about a specific moment in time where you didn't have confidence or your confidence was low and what you actually did to improve it?
Yeah. So from a work perspective, I'll say when I started my career, I was in consulting. It was the end of the 90s and the beginning of the 2000s. So there was a lot of change that was just going on in the way that we work. And I was in a very male-dominated role. And all of that I was kind of logically prepared for, but I wasn't actually emotionally prepared for it. And there was an inflection point where I realized like, well, I could stay here, and if I want to stay here, I probably have to make some adjustments. Like we didn't have the language back then about authenticity and about bringing your full self to work. Like it just wasn't something that was talked about. And so it's easy to reflect and go, oh, I just realized I wanted to be somewhere where I could be more authentic. But in the moment, there was so much more internal dilemma about, oh, is this something wrong with me? Like, am I not fitting into this role or this moment because something's wrong with me? And the decision to then say, you know what, let me just try going somewhere else and seeing if when there's a different fit, I feel a different way. And I look back on that and I try to coach a lot of young people to say, the first 10 years of your career are all about learning what you don't want to do. And that learning is really, really important. And it feels really yucky when you're in it. And there's a lot of self-doubt and there's a lot of like, what do I need to fix about me? But when I look back, I'm like, oh my gosh, that was the richest point of learning like, nope, I won't tolerate that. Nope, that's not where I want to be. No, I don't like the way I showed up there. And so that helped me then identify future places and opportunities where I felt like I could be more myself. And a really like literal example of that is like when I started my career in consulting, it was a very conservative business dress code. And I just felt really constrained by that because I love fashion and I've always been one to express myself with fashion and being colorful or wearing like fun shoes. And I was like, wow, this is really weird. Like I'm a grown ass adult. I'm making my own money. Why can't I wear what I want to wear? And one of my like, criteria for where I went next was like, I want there to be like a more fun dress code or the opportunity to express myself more through dress. And that might have felt like very frivolous, but I think it helped me get to a place where I felt more confident because how I dressed and how I showed up every day wasn't something I felt like I had to be like tampering or pulling back on.
How do you think style and fashion plays a role in your confidence and your ability to be successful at work?
Yeah, it plays a huge role. Like an example is I will speak at industry events or be asked to like be on stage. And a lot of people, because I've talked to a lot of my colleagues about this, the first thing they would do is like, be like, what am I going to say? And they'd sit down and they'd start sketching out like, here's my outline, here's my topic. And for me, I have to visualize what I'm going to be wearing. And I have to get through that to be able to then figure out what I'm going to say. And it's like, it's almost like a costuming exercise. It's like, okay, I'm going on stage at this event. What will I be wearing? Okay, now I know what I'll talk about. And so that's like just a very specific example. But for me, it's a lot of my work is like intangible because I work in technology. So I'm not like walking away with this physical thing that I created. And so fashion is like my way to be able to make things. I can put together outfits. I can collect items. I buy a lot of my clothes resale and I love designer fashion, but I can't afford to buy designer fashion off the shelf. So instead I then get into the treasure hunt of like, oh, there was this Dolce & Gabbana print from like the early 2000s that I want to show up to this event wearing. And so now I have to go on a search for it. And it just becomes like almost like a hobby or an activity that I can do that's really tangible. And yeah, it's also just kind of become something I'm known for. Like I dress a lot more feminine than a lot of my coworkers. I still work in a male dominated industry, but also tech is known for being very casual. And I don't like to dress casual. Like I still dress up a lot. So it's become a part of like my identity, my brand, and I find it to be really fun.
Thank you for that. And you do always look great, and that's why I commented on your style because you always come in looking impeccable. So
I feel like I should be wearing something different now that we're having this conversation. I should go change or something.
We could cut it.
It's a snowy Friday in Chicago. Yeah. This is like what was best.
Yeah. Faith. Can you talk about it? What does that word mean to you? God. What does that mean to you?
Yeah. So I was raised Catholic and, big Italian Catholic family and going to church every Sunday. And it was a very big part of my childhood and how I was raised. And it was a very big part of my husband's childhood and how he was raised. And then interestingly enough, fairly early in our marriage, we just recognized that we weren't really going to church. And we're like, what's that about? Like all the conditioning, all of the socialization would have indicated that we would be like a family that would go to church. We don't really do that, but I would say I have an enormous amount of faith. And so I think of faith in a couple different ways. I think of it referencing back to what I was just talking about is like, what have I learned and what do I know to be true and what do I feel confident about? Like that to me is where I feel like I connect with, and it could be something as simple as like walking at the lake in Chicago or as, extreme or exotic as like being in the mountains somewhere or, being at an incredible, on an incredible hike somewhere in a national park. But I think that the moments where I feel it most are when my smallness and the smallness of my problems or concerns are evident because of the grandness of nature and the bigness of like the surroundings.
Yeah.
So it doesn't answer your question directly, but from like when you said like signs, that's like immediately where my mind went is these moments where like I am in nature, it's overwhelmingly beautiful. And it also reminds me of like how small, how temporary, how insignificant the things that I might be really wrestling with are.
Yeah, I love being in nature too. I love that. We go to Wisconsin a lot, so I know exactly what you're talking about. And plus I live in the city as well. So being by the lake is one of my favorite things to do. So,
yeah. And I think it goes back to just finding those places where you can get quiet. Because like closing off all the inputs and the noise is a super important part to connecting with faith, connecting with values, connecting with like being grounded and being like, who am I? Why am I here? What am I intending to do?
So you talked a little bit about towards young people thinking and feeling about their job and knowing, you discussed things that helped you sort of get to the next thing. What do you say to young people that you work with or here with our audience? Like, what would you want to tell them about life? Like any advice that you'd want to give young women or men for that matter?
Well, that's a big question. I think one of the things I'm really grateful for is that I have a lot of women in my life who were ahead of me in both their career or in parenting. And I was able, again, back when I started my career, we didn't have the language that we have today. So the word representation wasn't like a part of what we talked about. But essentially what I'm describing is representation. It's, women who proved that you could be the breadwinner of your family. I saw them doing it. That proved that you could have children and have like a very demanding corporate job. Proved that you can live away from your parents or your family, So I think that representation and examples, visual examples, are very helpful to me. And so I would tell young people to look for those visual examples of what they're aspiring towards. And then if they feel brave enough to reach out to those people and to ask them the questions and, the decisions they made or how they got to certain places, I did that and I made those connections more through, I don't know, it sounds so tactical, but like doing projects or working with people on things. And I could prove to them like, hey, I have something I could give to you and I have something that could be of value to you. And in return, I really hope that you would be willing to take time and teach me. And I have one mentoring relationship that's over 26 years long. I met her when I was in college. We still talk every single Friday. And I think that the things that have made our relationship so lasting is that we're consistent. We're extremely authentic with one another and it's reciprocal. Like I help her and she helps me. And it's always been that way, even though the topics that we've discussed over 26 years have obviously changed like a ton. And she's retired now, so she's not steering me so much in my career as much as she is in other ways. So I guess to answer your question, I would tell people to seek out those that are living and representing the things that they're aspiring towards. And that to me gave me also a lot of confidence that it was possible.
That's great. Thank you. That's good advice. And one last thing. I'm big on positive affirmations, as you know. Are there things that you say to yourself on a regular basis that remind you of your power, of your strength, of your confidence, of your faith to keep you grounded, to get you to the next level? And, can you share that with our audience, affirmations or the idea of a positive affirmation that you may say to yourself?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I have tons of like mantras, and mantras are more to remind me of things, like nudges, like, hey, Kelly, don't forget this. Like, I know there's a lot going on and you got a lot of noise, but don't forget this thing. The one that I mentioned earlier, interesting input equals interesting output. Like that helps me like prioritize my time. I'm not on social media at all. And I was for a while and I gave it up. And it was because I felt like, oh, this is not interesting input. I need to go seek that somewhere else and use my time somewhere else. But at the same time, like, it's just this little, like, it's very sticky. It's very memorable. And then when I'm doing something, like when I went to see your lovely girls dance, I'm like, this is great. This is interesting input. This is art and it's performance and it's people who are doing amazing things with their bodies. And it's also someone telling a really predictable story in a new way. And like, it just gives me so much energy. So that's one. As far as a positive affirmation, I do a lot of like, I think especially I like being in environments, like I said earlier, where people are better than me or smarter than me or work in a different way than me, because that pushes me. But that also can make you feel insecure at times. So a lot of my affirmations are about reminding myself I'm capable. I've done this before. I'm capable. And then sometimes if it gets really hard, I'm like, I'm worthy. Like I deserve to be here. Because sometimes even I might not be capable. Like that might be the fact. Like I'm here, I might not be capable, but especially when you like are in a new role or job. And the thing about Google is you move around a lot and they hire people who are agile, and then they put you in situations where you have to be agile. And I find those early moments are the ones where like all the ugly self-doubt pops up. And so telling myself I'm capable in those moments is not helpful because I don't know what the hell I'm doing yet. So instead then I would switch more to a message of I'm worthy, I deserve to be here. And then I that mentor I've had for 26 years, she lost her mother right around the same time that I went through a breakup. It was in my mid-20s, and it just was like a really heartbreaking thing. And one of the other reasons why I think we have such a bond and had a lasting relationship is because she was older than me, but she never made anything I was going through feel insignificant. So it was never dismissed. And she really treated that like breakup and my heartbreak as significant as her losing her mother. And she's like, okay, this is going to be our affirmation that we're going to say to ourselves all the time. It's, I am strong, I am resilient, I can get knocked down, but I get right back up. And she did it like that with her 4 fingers. And I still do that all the time. I am strong, I am resilient, I can get knocked down, but I'll get right back up.
I love that. Can you share her first name?
Karen.
Karen.
Yes.
Hi, Karen.
Yeah,
thank you, Karen.
Karen's amazing.
We love Karen.
We love Karen. We spoke this morning. We speak every Friday morning at 8 a.m.
Good for you guys. What a special relationship to have. Very lucky. Kellie, thank you so much. You know, you've shared so much with us, and I just appreciate your time and your wisdom and talking about faith, confidence, your career, and also your style is a big part of who you are. So thank you so much for sharing.
Thanks, George.
Thank you.
I'm happy to help. This was so fun.
All right, cut. And yes, Kellie, you have been in my chair. You've been a client and a great friend. I don't even know, 20 years, 25?
20, well, let's see, 2003. 22 years. Yeah, 22 years. Longer than I've known my husband, longer than I've lived in Chicago. All the longest have longer than I lived in my parents' house. Like, known George longer than that.
Well, let's keep it going.
Yes.
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 Good. Thank you.